Bienvenidos a su programa de cabeza. Y realmente vamos a hablar de cabeza, de la cabeza. Dos extraordinarias invitadas. Puedo decir que son mis amigas, las aprecio ambas. He estado en sus espectaculares lugares, ya les platicaremos experiencias y anécdotas al respecto. Pero una de ellas, Louann Brizendine, escribió un libro que parece poco polémico, pero lo es, que se llama El cerebro de la mujer. Y Helen Fisher, que también ha estado ya con nosotros en este programa, una de las pensadoras más increíbles, contemporáneas para hablar sobre el amor, sobre el cerebro humano, sobre la neurociencia y la psicología evolutiva, también escribió un libro que, a diferencia de la gran y famosa obra de Simone de Beauvoir del segundo sexo, donde se explica que casi todo es cultural, nos escribe un libro, esta Helen Fisher, sobre el primer sexo. Es decir, antes todo se podía decir que era cultural y adquirido y era el medio ambiente, y eso es lo que nos definía por lo que somos, tanto en términos de identidad, de género, y hasta en términos de nuestras preferencias y nuestras aptitudes intelectuales. Viene una revolución biológica y hay gente valiente. Louann Brizendine y Helen Fisher son dos mujeres, dos personajes, dos celebridades brillantes, valientes. Welcome to your program. Thank you for being with us. Helen, Louann, it's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having us. Thank you, Andrés.
So, well, we will start with your own words. Please tell us about you. Louann, if you want to begin, who are you? What are your credentials? And please share with us what happened at the beginning when you wrote this amazing book, The Female Brain, coming from a cultural perspective and you bringing the biological to the scene. Welcome.
Of course. I started a clinic in 1993 at UC San Francisco, University of California, San Francisco, after I'd finished all of my medical education on at Yale and Harvard, and had done a lot of work at UC Berkeley in the early 70s and 80s on hormone effects on behavior. And so that's what got me interested in having become a psychiatrist in the meantime, and looking at many of the women I was treating, because women had a 2-to-1 ratio of depression more than males. And that always struck me as being quite a robust finding. And the reason why was unknown. Of course, it's still largely unknown. So that's what originally got me into starting the clinic, the Women's Mood and Hormone Clinic, about how women's hormones affected, we knew about PMS, premenstrual syndrome was something that was known, but we didn't know why it happened. And then, so we're looking at how the hormones at the end of the menstrual cycle take that big crash down. You lose your progesterone goes away. So 24 hours before you start your period, 80 or 90% of women describe remembering or knowing how you feel more irritable, more anxious, maybe you're ready for a fight, or you'll just, we call it, you cry over dog food commercials, or you burst into tears easily at movies. So we my clinic wanted to be able to both validate that and be able to help women who had the very worst versions of that. And that's how the hormone and mood interest came to me, and in my research on hormone effects in the brain, particularly the female hormones, the progesterone, the estrogen, and the female testosterone, how they affect your interest in having sex, your libido, how it has to do with your empathy and your emotional circuitry, how it also then, when progesterone drops quickly, can make you have more negative emotions, many more negative emotions at that time. So I was wanting to, look at that aspect of the female brain. and got me into looking more at the aspects of all of the connections in the female brain and the receptors in the female brain that have to do with estrogen and progesterone and testosterone fluctuations. So that is where my interest was. And an editor came to me and wanted me to write a book about it. And the result was the female brain, looking at all of the aspects of the female brain, the female hormones, the menstrual cycle fluctuations in the hormones that in utero build the circuitry that's different in the male brain and female brain and the receptors. And of course, I think it's important to say from the get-go, we all know that the male and female brain are more alike than different. After all, we are the same species. So I don't want to take it it's not like we're two different species, we're the same species. But I was particularly interested in the things that we know about the female brain, female emotions, female hormone fluctuations during and after pregnancy. So those were important to what I was interested in. And writing a book about it, really, it hit a nerve with people. It also hurt a nerve with lots of people who didn't want to hear there was any difference in the male and female.
We will talk about that in a minute, for sure. Thank you very much, Louann. Helen, please, that the people recognize you. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for the people who are listening. I'm Dr. Helen Fisher. I'm a biological anthropologist, and I am probably best known for studying the brain in love. I've written several books on it. I and my colleagues have put over 100 people into a brain scanner using fMRI to track the actual brain pathways of romantic love and attachment. 97% of mammals do not pair up to where the young people do. We're a very special species in that we form pair bonds and raise our children as a team. So that's what started it. My most recent book is called Anatomy of Love, second edition. But I became very interested in gender differences because so many scientists have been looking into the brain and found gender differences when they weren't even looking. And because I'm an anthropologist, for millions of years, men and women did different jobs, and different jobs selected for different kinds of brains in certain ways. So I wrote a book called The First Sex, The Natural Talents of Women and How They're Changing the World. And just like Louann said, there's many similarities between the male and female brain, but there are real differences. And I have come to believe that those differences are very important today. I mean, the main trend today is not technology. The main worldwide social trend today is women piling into the job market in cultures around the world. And they bring with them some very special talents that evolved millions of years ago. So I then wrote a book called Why Him, Why Her? Why You Fall in Love with One Person Rather Than Another. And I really dissect those traits of the female brain a second time. And so there's lots of differences. There's some similarities, but there's real differences. And the more you understand the male brain and the female brain, the more you can reach into it and connect.
Thank you very, very much, Helen. Imagine both of you that a person, well, it's not the correct word, that a being or whatever you want to call it comes from another planet and approach both of you and say, well, I really want to understand a little bit of, it's the same species, I get it. Actually, everybody has 99% of similarities, probably 1% of difference even between males. As we have been in another program sharing that probably we have like 50% with bananas. But there's some difference. Both of you have talked about difference. And this person from another planet wants to know a little bit before it approaches to the human beings and to talk differently. What could be like the biggest discoveries you have found that you could actually advise and say, well, there have been a lot of urban myths, but this is science. This is what we really know in terms of the understanding of spaces, of time, of emotions, of whatever. I don't know if you would like, whoever would like to start, I don't know, like to share with us a little bit of the differences.
I'll just start a little bit and then I'll hand it to Helen. But, one of the things we know, for example, that we would talk about someone extraterrestrial that would come and you'd want to know the major differences between the male and the female behaviorally, that we do know from psychology for, hundreds of years of study is that there's about a 20-to-1 ratio in terms of physical aggression in males. So that would be one of the first things that they would notice. Not only do males have, bigger musculature and whatever, but males actually have more what's called physical aggressivity. However, when you look at the amount of anger that males report feeling a day and anger females feel a day, the anger issue is 1-to-1. But the physical aggression is different. Of course, and males they are the ones that kind of like search out fertile females and want to mate with fertile females. Helen can say some more about that. And females are usually the ones to accept or reject the male. So in terms of the behavioral things that we see on the surface, and females, of course, taking care of the young and being the ones that are the one that have, females need to be able to be very perceptive and empathic. After all, we have to keep helpless infants, nonverbal helpless infants alive for several years because human babies are born so helpless. So those would be the very big differences right off the bat. I'm sure Helen has some more to say about that.
And Helen, in terms of love also, please. Helen, sorry.
I think that there are some very basic differences, and it's the way the brain is built, just as Louann said. Women do more of what I call web thinking. There seems to be more connections between the two hemispheres of the brain, and perhaps more connections between factories in the back of the brain to the front of the brain. So women tend to think more holistically, more contextually, and more long-term. A man will say, get to the point. They do what I call step thinking. They go, they get rid of extraneous data and focus on the goal. Whereas women collect data, all kinds of data from everywhere, and assemble it together. This is one of the reasons that, women will be very imaginative. Women also have more verbal skills and more people skills. They can find the right word rapidly, they can read posture, gesture, and tone of voice more. They're more socially skilled, on average, of course, than men. And there's a good deal of data as men are more expressive in terms of aggression. Women are more expressive in terms of empathy and trust. And women are also more emotionally expressive. Men contain their emotions more, but when they get mad, they get really mad. It's sort of a violent rage, where women's emotions trickle out all the time. So if I were from a different planet and I were coming into America or anywhere in the world today, and I was talking with a man, I'd get to the point. I'd get right to the point with him. And with a woman, I might say all kinds of other ancillary things, think of all of the alternatives, the opposites, etc., and express more nurturing with a woman and probably more skepticism with a man.
Exactly. I was thinking when I was writing, Andres, when I was writing the male brain, I took a little yellow sticky and I put it on my husband's computer, and it said he was not supposed to, when I came to talk to him about something, I would want to talk about all the details, all the context, all the way, and he would want to get to the point. But only thing I wanted him to say to me is, honey, I know how you feel. And so I had a little yellow sticky that I put on his computer. So before he turned to me and told me specifically what to do about something, I wanted him to first say, honey, I know how you feel. And then that would open the doors for my listening circuits to listen to what he was trying to say. But if he just goes straight to the point, it's a very, it's a typical male and female difference that really causes, I think, with couples a lot of difficulty, because she wants to talk about the context. She wants to talk about the details of something, because she feels if he hasn't heard those, then he doesn't really understand what she's saying. So there's this big cognitive difference in the way we process and think about the details, as Helen was saying.
And actually, this is helpful for a person, from an extraterrestrial whatever entity, but it's very helpful for men to listen what you're telling us and share it to us. Can we change? Of course, when we have been talking, for example, with Robert Plumbing and with a lot of people that study the DNA, this is what it is, but it could be very different. Helen, in relations, in love, etc., understanding which are our differences. That I think it's a big step, because even that we have this, I don't know, radar, because that's our testosterone. Men, could we become much more emotional? Could we talk not only and behave and say, hey, I want to understand what you feel and to feel what you feel, but not like because of my behavior. Could I actually change my character and become much more emotional, for example?
I think that we have parameters. You can act out of character, as people say, but it's tiring. Now, for example, when I'm with a lot of men in a business meeting, I can get straight to the point. I can be skeptical. I can even be quite aggressive, but it's not me. And so I'll do it, but I get tired from doing it. So, but I do think that men like to please. I mean, I have data on over 50,000 Americans now, and men fall in love faster. They fall in love more often. When they are in love, they want to introduce the person to friends and family sooner. Men want to move in sooner. Men have more intimate conversations with their wives than women do with their husbands, because women have the intimate conversations with their girlfriends, and men are 2.5 times more likely to kill themselves when a relationship is over. So when it comes to romance, men can really be the more fragile sex. I mean, nobody gets out of love alive, but when men are a little bit more fragile. And you know what? We all want to please. I mean, we're trying to win and keep life's greatest prize, which is a mating partner. So sure, men and women can change. But the thing to do is to find somebody who you're quite naturally very comfortable with, so you don't have to change every day, because that'd be very tiring.
When we started this program, I mentioned in Spanish that before both of you appearing in the intellectual scene, and few other people, that mainly you, the two rock stars that I have today in the program, it was like politically incorrect, and before, I mean, at the end of the 20th century, everything was culture. Just to talk about, I mean, you are more aggressive or you're less aggressive, and this has not to do with the culture where you are, it's because of the biological thing, and come from an anthropologist person like you, Helen. This was a revolution, and also your book, Louann. Did you receive a lot of criticism? It was easy for you to have that courage and say, we're not the second sex, we're the first sex. There is a book for the male brain and a book for the female brain, Louann. Could you share with us that experience? Because you were very, I mean, you had a lot of courage to do it.
I took a lot of incoming. I took a lot of criticism, and which was very surprising to me, because I consider myself, very much for many years, in favor of, I've been into, women's rights ever since I was at UC Berkeley in the 70s. So that's been part of my identity. So it was very interesting. And there was a time, you may all remember, during the kind of movement when it was mandatory unisex, women were supposed to have the same kind of orgasms, women fell in love the same. We were supposed to be just the same as men. In order to be equal to men, we had to be the same as men. It was a whole, that's kind of like a mandate of some of my generation. So I knew, having gone through that, but then having studied the male and female brain, and then written the female brain and the male brain, I took just a lot of flack because I broke, basically I was a heretic breaking that rule that men and women were just alike, and that if women were not just like men, then we couldn't be quote unquote equal to men. So it was still very much in the ethos of lots of academics that studied, in the sociology and in the women's studies world, that was still the mandate. So to have someone put it out in that kind of way was, really against the grain of trying for equality. And so the reality is, I think we've come more and more around to that now, is that, you don't have to be identical. You don't have to be identical biologically in all ways in order to be equal, that you can be different and be equal. And that I think that we're really, the whole world and culturally, we're pushing towards that now. But at the time my book came out in 2006, it was still sort of a heretical idea in some fields. So yeah, I took a lot of incoming about how can you say it's different? It's only different in in the averages. It's only so people would dissect lots of parts of what I had to say in a very critical way. But I think we're coming around now to yes, you can be different and still be equal. But I think we're still struggling with that in the gender area, that if women aren't just like men, then we can't get the same amount of pay for the same work. We can't get we don't have equal voice. We don't have equal political representation. So we're still struggling with that a lot right now.
For sure.
Yeah, well,
Helen.
I'm sorry that I thought that maybe Louann would have gotten out alive, because I definitely did not. My book was 6 years earlier. It published first in 1999 and then again in 2000. And I grew up in the nature-nurture issue. I'm an identical twin, and when I went to graduate school, we were being taught, just like you said, Andres, that it's all culture, that it's the culture that makes women different from men, that it's the way you treat little girls as opposed to little boys. And I knew it wasn't true. I knew it wasn't true because I'm an identical twin, and I could watch the ways in which we had some very distinct biological similarities and some cultural differences. I'm sorry for that. I've tried to turn it off, so
Don't worry.
It'll stop now. But anyway, so I wrote the book. I think I had hoped that I was publishing that book at a good time, because as Louann said, there's been decades of data from psychologists that women are more verbally skilled, that men are more spatially skilled, and all kinds of other differences. And so I thought, well, maybe people are prepared for this. And so I was very punctilious in my data. And I spent 5 years writing the book. And you guys know what it's like to write a book. You're writing on Christmas morning. You're writing on New Year's Day. You're writing at night. You're writing on weekends. You're constantly writing. You're writing 10 hours a day. And I spent 5 years writing that book. And a group of feminists, really, who did not believe that there are gender differences, killed it in 1 week on Amazon. And I've never been so disappointed. Because not only that, but the bottom line is, I was saying that there are gender differences, but I was saying this is good news. These gender differences, women are going to come into the job market and bring all these skills. I mean, men and women are like 2 feet. We were designed, we need each other to get ahead. It's important to know these gender differences. It's good for business to know who your women are, to put them into the right place, to add to the company. And yet, because people would not believe there were any gender differences at all, they threw the baby out with the bathwater.
I agree. And I mean, even that you had a week with a lot of criticism, at the end, both of you brought a very powerful new cosmovision, a new paradigm to understand human nature. And as both of you have said, one thing it's equality and more in terms of law, in terms of empowerment, and the other thing it's what it makes us what we are. Before we go, I would love to ask you this question and be very honest. I mean, there are topics, there are boundaries in this bell curve that are in the extreme and have created a lot of problems for some people, like the former president of Harvard University, when he mentioned that men and women were different in terms of STEM, in science, in math, in things like this. And it was very controversial. And well, one thing is if you should say it as a president of a university, that's another problem. And the other thing is if this is a urban myth or if he actually was right. I don't know the answer. I don't know if you know it. It's really a fact that, please share it with us.
I mean, Larry Summers, who said that out at the curves that there's more men than women in certain areas of math and physics and things. And so, I think that was what he said that was so controversial. And Professor Hopkins, Nancy Hopkins basically she's a professor at MIT, took him on that issue. And so I think that you can quibble about the curves and you can quibble about, that there's more women in the center of the curve and more men out on the tails, that men aren't doing well, men that are doing better, and there are fewer women there. But I think it's a little too early. I mean, women and like culture, there's educational, cultural encouragement of women to go into STEM subjects, go into math and physics. That hasn't happened for generations and generations like it has for men. So I think, we may want to take another look at that in another 25 years is what I have to say about that.
Well, I don't have to take another look. I'm sorry. I went on national television supporting what he had to say. And if you go back through, 5 decades of data, men, just as Louann said, in the center, they're just the same. But when you look at the top 5% or the top 10%, it's a huge percentage more men than women who are good at all kinds of spatial skills. And as an anthropologist, for millions of years, men's main job was to go out, track animals, hit them in the head with a rock, and find their way back home. And when you take a look in the brain and you give them all kinds of tests, there's more men in that very top percentage of people with all kinds of spatial mathematical skills. Now, we're going to have more women in STEM, but they don't go into STEM. I just don't think we can really, and little boys, tiny boys, will be able to track a blinking light on a TV monitor more than little girls. And then you inject testosterone into various animals, and they're better at a maze. Over and over and over, the data shows right now that men are, I don't want to say on average because that's a little mathematically skewed, but they land at the top end of that bell-shaped curve. Now, there certainly are all kinds of women who are high testosterone and totally straight, whatever, who are very good at math. I'm not saying that they're not, but there's more men for millions of years. They had a different job that required certain skills that they express today around the world.
It's a big debate, because as you know, Helen, for example, in junior high school, females are better in math in average in all the world than men. And then things changes. That's pretty interesting. And just following, Louann, what you mentioned, we had in another program, Robert Plumbing, and he said, that variance between individuals within group in terms of intelligence and this kind of skills, it's very well proven. But between across groups, men versus women, white versus whatever, etc., it's very difficult, and we still need a lot of research. But so far, it's really important that we do the research, because it has a lot of policy implications that we could work with them and not to be afraid and not talk about them. And what I love about your work is you have done a very important thing, that we should talk, do research, and become much more sound in our answers and be serious about them. It has been really an honor to be with both of you. Thank you very much, and muchas gracias. All our love. Gracias.
Thank you, Andrés. Take good care. Take good care.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Helen, Louann. Señoras y señores, ustedes tienen la última opinión. Les recomiendo los libros tanto de Louann Brizendine como de Helen Fisher. Bien importante, no es lo mismo ser igual que ser idéntico. Bien importante, reconocer nuestras diferencias, pero no subestimar, ni quitar, ni juzgar nada que le quite a alguien el mismo derecho ante la ley, ante las instituciones y ante las autoridades. Todavía hay mucho que hacer por empoderar a la mujer. Y por supuesto comprenderlo, pero entender cómo operamos nos va a permitir comunicarnos mejor y avanzar a políticas públicas que hagan mejor, que no solo tengan buenas intenciones, sino buenos resultados, no buenas intenciones y malas políticas. Muchas gracias. Esto es De Cabeza. Nos vemos el próximo domingo. Quédense en ADN 40, su canal. Feliz domingo.